download file, right? Let me know. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Agarwal on behalf of Zycus would like to welcome you all for today's presentation on Pulse of Procurement Europe 2016. We had reached out to 650 procurement professionals to gather their inputs on a research report that we were developing on, and we've come up with a benchmarking study, results of which we are sharing in this webinar. Before on to the presentation, I'd like to take through a few housekeeping instructions. At any given point in time, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat box on the right-hand side corner of your screen. In the next couple of days, we'll be sharing the presentation slide as well as the archive link to the webinar for you to view at your own convenience. The presenter is Richard Waugh, who is VP Corporate Development at Zycus Inc. Extensive background in B2B e-commerce. He launched GE's Trading Process Network, the first online marketplace for sourcing and procurement. He's the co-founder of B2E Markets, one of the first software as a service sourcing suite providers, and later covered the supply management market as an industry analyst for the Aberdeen Group. That's my side. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Ankit, and good day to everyone joining for this session today on the Pulse of Procurement 2016. And just before I launch into the results of that broad-based, expansive study, just a little bit of contextual information about Zycus. So the way we approach the market, the procurement market, is as a software provider of an integrated suite of source-to-pay solutions. So we're looking across the procurement process, both in terms of strategic procurement, sometimes referred to as the upstream processes around tools like spend analytics and sourcing, contract and supplier management, and then also the operational phase of the procurement process, sometimes referred to as downstream, that would include procure to pay, so requisitions, orders, catalogs, as well as settlement through the invoice management and payment process. So for Zycus, we are exclusively and single-mindedly focused on procurement, which is the motivation for producing a study that is designed to take the pulse of the procurement profession so that we can continue to monitor those trends and tailor solutions that are reflective and representative of the requirements in the marketplace. So I want to talk about the Pulse of Procurement and just a little bit on the study demographics to orient you to the methodology for study. It is quite an ambitious, I would say, annual endeavor that Zycus does. We produce a report every year. And it's very much global in scope and very statistically valid sample size. So 650 residents globally. And as you'll see as I go through the details of the study, it really delves into all aspects of procurement, both in terms of strategy and the perception of the procurement function by the C-suite, top pain or focus areas for the procurement function, performance across a number of relevant benchmarks and metrics, as well as some of the strategies, the implementation strategies that procurement teams are taking with regards to technology adoption and utilization. So those are the components from a scope standpoint. In terms of the demographics themselves, it's a broad range of different types of companies, really at all sizes, although it does skew more towards large enterprises. So about three-fourths, actually over three-quarters of respondents have revenues in excess of $500 million US per annum. One of the things that's really compelling here is because the sample size is so large, 650 globally, basis, we have a statistically valid sample. So in Europe today, with 26% of the respondents overall, that's about 170 just from Europe. And that gives us the ability to create actually a European edition, which I'll be sharing today, which is available as a download following the webinar, that really hones in on the specific challenges, issues, strategies that are being adopted in Europe and contrast that to the global group overall as well. The respondents themselves cover a wide range of functional job titles and roles, but tend to be more in the managerial or executive of the organization, so they tend to have a pretty good purview, pretty good visibility across the function as to what the initiatives are, what the performance has been to date. So that kind of gets out of the way, a little bit of the background, but lots of relevant data, broad and statistically relevant sample size from which to draw. I wanted to start out with perception, because perception is reality, as we know, and the perception specifically in this case, what is the C-suite view of the procurement function, both in terms of its maturation and the relative importance to the business overall. So let's start with this kind of a maturity model first, and it really looks at various stages of the maturation process for the procurement function and assesses how the C-suite views their internal procurement group, and sort of going left to right here. Of course, the starting point is just getting started, early wins. So that may be the initial formation, kind of a formal procurement function for that business. So just getting started. But the organizations that progress to the next stage, gaining momentum, doing the basics. They're getting out the door. They're getting contracts in place. They're managing the assurance of supply, which is sort of that minimum requirement, but they're starting to gain momentum. Progressing to the next stage, extending influence, would really be marked by those organizations that have started to expand their scope in terms of the process coverage, as well as the spend coverage that they're able to access in extending influence. The next stage, systematic wins. Those high-performing organizations that have created audited, replicable processes capable of producing those systematic, repeatable kinds of wins. And, of course, the last stage is kind of those that have planted the flag and declared victory. They're the global best in class. So interesting to note here that, and again, this data is specific to European organizations that responded, just 4% have said, game over here, we've achieved the goal, or we think we're at best in class. Relatively small percentage, small minority at that stage, but I think what's very, very encouraging here is the majority are actually at the level 3 or level 4, if you will, so on the cusp of achieving best in class, that they're either extending influence or actually at that stage where they're creating those replicable systematic wins. In fact, when we contrast the 33% of European respondents that said they're at that final stage of maturation prior to best in class, the systematic wins, that's 10 points higher, 33% overall than 23%, which was the global average. So relatively speaking, pretty mature, pretty evolved from a procurement standpoint across the range of European groups that surveyed in this study. And that's as noted by the C-suite view. So we didn't actually at the C-level to respond. This was the procurement leaders assessing what they think their executive management's view of their procurement maturity is. So, in some cases that could be there could be a discrepancy there, but overall, this is the self-assessment on the procurement respondents to our study. So that's from a maturation or maturity standpoint. We wanted to measure, and based on the procurement respondents, what do they think their C-suite's view is of the importance of the function, the business overall, and again here, with regards to the European view, higher, 89%, said that believe their executive management viewed the procurement function as important or critical to the business strategy, so higher than any other regional component in this particular survey. And likewise, one question that was posed was, does your procurement and sourcing organization have a mandate to manage spending at the enterprise level? Fully 80% of the European organizations surveyed said they had that mandate, and that's 12 points higher than the 68% as a global average. So that's very good news, very encouraging that starting point, organizations feel that they're getting the executive support and buy-in and recognition the importance that the function can bring to the business overall. Now for the bad news. We looked at procurement budgets and changes year over year. And specific to Europe, overall procurement budgets appear to be either flat, this is before, or declining. And that's true across a number of different variables from a budget standpoint, whether it's operating expense, the OPEX budget, capital budgets, or say headcount, the labor and FTEs involved. So this is a trend that's true globally, but it was much more pronounced in Europe than in other parts of the globe in terms of the degree to which year comparison, those that responded that their budgets were the same or would be increasing, was actually down 13 points for the operating expense, 9 points for the capital budgets, and 10 points overall in terms of head count. In fact, some 22 to 35% of procurement organizations in Europe actually reported outright budget cuts for 2016. So that's not just maintaining parity or keeping the budget flat, but actually declining budgets, and exacerbates the number one pain point that union procurement groups told us they were experiencing, which was a lack of sufficient time and resources. A number of implications here for procurement teams faced with this kind of budget reality that says basically you're tasked with doing more with less or the same. And I think one of the clear implications is automation is a must. If you're not going to get more budget dollars or certainly more heads to support the function, it really creates an imperative for getting the kind of productivity gains and efficiencies that can come only through automation. The other implication here depends on which element of the budget is experiencing the greatest pressure. So, for instance, some organizations tighten up the capital budgets more so than the operating expense, and that's an area where technology and automation is an imperative. The news there is that models today are software as a service that can therefore be funded through operating expense based on an annual subscription instead of a capital purchase, for instance, that would be the case if you were buying a perpetual license and deploying software behind the firewall. So maybe some flexibility there. The other thing to look at is if the pressure is most acute on the count component, the labor FTEs, is that outsourcing can be a popular alternative to be able to deliver that the business expects without having the headcount on staff and funding that through an outsourced initiative as well. So some different strategies or implications there, but at the end of the day, it really says that it's a tall order for procurement groups that are being asked to do more with less or the same. We also looked at what are the top 5 European procurement focus areas for 2016. So the top 5 cost savings, no surprise there, procurement organizations worldwide are typically the most reliable or most traditional metric has been cost savings. I'm going to talk a little bit more about cost savings in a minute. But first two, cost savings, efficiency, kind of inwardly focused on procurement, optimizing the function from an internal procurement standpoint. The next one start to look externally, whether it's supplier risk management, supplier performance, so external suppliers, and number 5, collaboration with other functions. So not just within the procurement department, but how do you collaborate across the lines of business or with the business stakeholders. So that's the top 5. And one of the things that really stood out in the European edition of this study is that it was, in fact, the only one that supply risk management remained in the top 5 in 2016. It was in the top 5, number 4 globally in 2015. But for this year, it really fell by the wayside, if you will, at least from a top 5 standpoint for the other areas of the globe, but remains a top concern in Europe. And certainly some of that focus on supply risk has to be driven by the volatility seen in the EU overall. So just from a timeliness standpoint, for instance, just in the past week, the Brexit situation and some of the uncertainty that's created is, I think, certainly reflective of a higher level of awareness around supply risk management in Europe as opposed to other parts of the globe. So cost savings, that remains number 1, the top pain point. Interesting contrast here, if we compare past savings performance, for example, is notably strong in Europe, where about 1/4 report savings at the high saver mark of 10% or greater. That category of savings, those double-digit kind of savings results, European organizations reported that was 5 percentage points higher than the global average overall. So past performance from a savings standpoint has been very strong in Europe, but on the other hand, in terms of forecasting savings for 2016, Europe at 7% lags the global forecast of 9% overall. So maybe sort of factoring in some of those economic headwinds or uncertainties that exist and a little bit more conservative in Europe with the 7% compared to 9% for America and 11% in Asia Pacific, and higher projected savings in Asia Pacific could well be attributed to actually a lower level of maturity there. So, going back to our maturity model where we're talking about wins or gaining momentum or extending influence more of the groups in Asia at that stage. So lots of greenfield opportunities from a savings standpoint as well. What's about spend under management? And again, very good news for the performance for Europe overall as compared to their counterparts. If we look at spend under management, and the definition typically here is that spend that is, number 1, discretionary in nature. So you would exclude non-discretionary, non-controllable types of expenditures like payroll or taxes, but really look at just those categories of spend that procurement can control or influence influence, and then as a percentage of that controllable spend or discretionary spend, what percentage is procurement in fact directly managing, controlling, or influencing? And here, those procurement teams are significantly higher in higher spend under management categories. So 67% report spend under management that's at 61% of the total spend or greater. So 26% are said they're at better than 80% spend under management, 41% between 60 and 80%, and those two categories, the European firms were 21 points higher than the global counterparts overall. So next, there's still a significant percentage here, of course, about 2/3 that are above 60% spend under management, which means that 1/3 are below that level. And some key strategies then to boost spend under management. Number one, expand spend analytics and visibility. So more granular visibility down to a line item category level, and more frequent refreshes of that spend information to be able to take action more quickly and execute and optimize on those savings opportunities. Number two is to revisit those categories that may have previously been ruled out as non-addressable. So it means going after the tail spend or the sacred cows, so to speak. The organizations include things like marketing or legal expenditure, and using actually the spend visibility to get influence over those categories by making it a fact-based discussion with the business leaders to help them solve problems. Number three, really technology. Look for mobile and other disruptive technologies as a way to increase adoption and get visibility to spend overall. And last but not least, collaboration. So partnering with the business. We talked about the fact that procurement budgets, particularly in Europe, are flat to declining overall. Well, your counterparts in those other functional areas have their own budget challenges. So one of the best strategies for procurement to get that seat at the table, to get involved early, is to collaborate with business partners and really show them your willingness to help them solve their own budget challenges. That procurement can be an effective tool that they can use to help overcome constraints that they're experiencing as well. So at this point, we wanted to launch a poll question. Have you weigh in as well? We've gathered a lot of survey responses and sharing those with you from the Tulsa Procurement Study. But our first poll question, we wanted to say, we talked about some of the procurement pain points and wanted to get a sense from the audience today. A number of different areas that can create pain for any procurement team, but wanted to get a sense, is it A, time and resources? Is it B, poor information quality, especially around things like spend data? Is it C, poor visibility in how suppliers are performing? D, is the data itself across disparate sources, so difficult to aggregate? Or E, are the processes lacking standardization? Unstructured data reporting, when it comes to the sourcing process itself, is it long or unduly cumbersome, or is it lack of compliance? So hopefully, as I've read through those and you've looked through the poll responses, you'll chance to see that at various times each of these may cause some type of pain, but really to weigh in on, what is creating the pain that really is most acutely in need of being addressed with some kind of a palliative measure. And I think we probably can go ahead and close that poll and just go ahead and take a look at some results. Certainly, I think as we showed in the responses around the budget challenges, time and resources are going to come to the fore. Data quality typically be an issue as well. And looking to get no tabulations here as well as closed. So the time and resources is going to be number one, but don't have the results yet, and into time I'm going to move on. Oh, well, here they are. So they just came up, and actually prognostication was correct in this case. Time and resources did come in at number one at 22%. Other poll respondents said that's the biggest pain point, followed by of compliance, long, cumbersome sourcing processes, and poor information quality. So, kind of a distribution across, but again, consistent with what we saw in the survey overall, that given the budget realities, resources really come to the fore as the pain that most of you are dealing with today. So we talked about cost savings. We talked about spend under management. Another key benchmark metric that we wanted to keep tabs of in the Pulse of Procurement study is the contract compliance. Again, good news here from a European standpoint, just as the case with higher spend under management, really a strong culture of compliance for the organizations that have responded from Europe to a study here. So 48% are in top two categories of compliance. That's, than 60% compliance. 48%, almost half of the total, said they're at 61% or higher, and that it was 8 points above the global overall. And in the average European compliance at 57% is higher than both the Asia Pacific and American areas. So 57%, that's good news. Of course, that means that on average there's still 43% that say that their spending is not compliant to contract. So therefore, that really begs the question of what strategies can be implemented to improve contract compliance overall. And certainly in most cases, that means starting by creating visibility to the preferred agreements pricing. So for most organizations, that means creating a stable repository that's aggregated across the enterprise that creates that visibility. And a next step that more and more organizations are looking to is to say, not just that there's a way to aggregate those agreements, but how do I make the contracted pricing terms, preferred vendors, to users at the point of need. So creating contract management to procure to pay and having those agreements visible at the point of requisition, which, let's face it, is really the moment of truth to order that's either compliant or non-compliant. When an end user or requisitioner is creating an order, product or service, making sure that they have those relevant agreements visible so that they make the right choice, which is to be compliant instead of non-compliant, because compliant behavior is seldom willful. Usually just a matter of not having the visibility. And it's a matter then of making it easy for users to do the right thing to increase compliance overall. A little bit now about technology adoption and how technology adoption can help further the goals of the procurement teams in Europe as well as globally. And one of the things we look at, I want to introduce this model first before I get into the more detailed assessments of technology adoption and planned investments look at adoption from the point that we don't just want to measure that a technology has been deployed, but kind of what is the level of satisfaction with that particular technology. So here you've got a model that looks at how do we measure state-of-the-art technology adoption versus sort of average, middle of the curve, or behind the curve, sort of a lagging technology capability. Yes, we have it, but it's well behind what would be considered state-of-the-art. So with this model in mind, you see kind of a normal distribution here where the top 20% really feel like they've got the best-in-class state-of-the-art tools, and the vast majority in the middle of the pack, and a third that would typically be considered lagging or behind the curve. So here's a lot of data for you that breaks down technology adoption by discrete functional application areas across the sourcing and procurement process. And this looks at how folks have already deployed some form of a tool, they have it, will they invest, or do they have any plans to invest? And then not only that they have it, as I said, but do consider their current capability in that particular area to be state-of-the-art or middle of the pack or behind the curve. And the last dimension that we looked at here was what type of solution have you deployed? Has it been sort of a homegrown, in-house developed capability? Is it that capability provided by your incumbent ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning platform? Is it a point solution or single solution that, for instance, is just for e-sourcing, just for contract management? Or is it a suite that encompasses all of the different aspects of kind of best-of-breed suite across sourcing and procurement? So data here, and a lot of interesting, I think, results here, especially as regards Europe, that relatively high penetration rates. So across all of these categories, from spend analysis through contract management, procure to pay, as well as some of the more complementary functions around project management, request management, savings tracking, etc. In any case, a European domain greater than 50% penetration. They say they have some type of solution that addresses that capability. The though is that the best in class or behind the curve compared to state-of-the-art was true in every case as well, except for savings tracking. So, or the majority of organizations say they have every one of these capabilities from a technology standpoint, but in every case, save for one, savings, they feel like they're behind the curve currently, not state-of-the-art. So that really says that there's a lot of experience here, but a lot of opportunity improvement as well. And in fact, that's borne out by if you look at the number that are planning to invest or plan to upgrade, that significant percentage that have plans to improve here. And based on the fact, too, that there's currently a fairly even distribution of the different solution types from one functional module to the next, with maybe a notable exception in the area of procure to pay, where ERP is really the dominant current platform at 58% of those deploying solutions are using ERP as opposed to a best-of-breed tool for procure to pay currently, and that could be due in large part to the kind of the tight integration between procure to pay and the financial ERP modules around general ledger, report, etc. The other that kind of stood out in this data is the savings tracking, which is well penetrated, is primarily done through a homegrown application today. So probably reflective of the fact that every organization needs to track and report savings. It was, after all, the number one focus area in our survey. But B, then, that for the part there have been few commercially available tools to address this particular function. So many organizations have decided to roll their own to have that capability, so to speak. So let's look at technology and this adoption of state-of-the-art versus middle-of-the-pack or behind-the-curve capabilities. Really looks at the overall net scores for the different types of solutions, be they homegrown, ERP, single-point solutions, or a fully integrated suite for sourcing and procurement, and comes up with an overall net score when you subtract the behind-the-curve ratings from state-of-the-art. So obviously, it's much better to be in a positive territory here, and there's strong correlation between the highest state-of-the-art ratings and the adoption of, first and foremost, the suite, a best-of-breed suite, at E3 is the net score overall, and followed by ERPs. And as the two in positive territory, and of course, that means that either point solutions or homegrown solutions tend to lag well behind and be in the negative territory, which signifies overall being behind the curve as opposed to state-of-the-art. Technology standpoint, we really want to look at to what extent are those technologies not only deployed or being planned for investment or upgrade, but tools that you currently have, to what degree are you using the capabilities that are inherent in those technologies? So here, the average overall for Europe is at 55% of ability, and nearly 80% use more, over 40% of the functionality in the tools that they already have, which is really pretty good. In fact, follows a trend that showed in the Pulse of Procurement 2016 a pretty significant increase from the prior year at 6 points overall, higher utilization of the available existing technology tools. And, I would have to conclude that to an extent that's driven by the fact that solution providers such as Zycus and others are really being driven to tools that are more accessible, easier to use, that enable end users to take more advantage of the capabilities inherent then, and expect that trend to continue as we go forward and further focus on ease of use, intuitiveness in the technologies themselves. So at this point, we wanted to have our second poll question on this subject of technology, and specific to when you go about selecting technology, what criteria are most critical? So as you think through this and respond, and we'll go ahead and the poll is open now, but is it A, ease of use, most critical decision factor when you're selecting a technology? Is it B, more of a price value equation? What's the total cost of ownership type of assessment that you make? Is it C, more specific to the features and functions, that you've got a match to your requirements? Is it D, the provider themselves? Are they responsive? D, is it E, that they provide good sales support? Or F, that they have particularly compelling customer references? Or G, the overall brand assessment and reputation of the provider that you select. So, of course, a number of different dimensions being measured here. Some around the brand, reputation, service, quality of the provider themselves, some around the price-performance trade-off, or ease of use, or specific functional capabilities. That's the requirements, kind of a checklist for that particular provider. So we're going to go ahead and hopefully you've had a chance to think about that and really assess what comes to the top for you in terms of the most important technology selection criteria in your business. And as we close the polls, I'm just waiting for the results to show up here. Again, I'll do a little bit of projecting. Ease of use typically has been the most important factor from a global standpoint. Case as the results do come in, it's actually interesting that did not come to fore for this group. In fact, the most critical criteria tends to be the actual solution features in the technology itself. So it really implies that most groups specific to our audience today in Europe that are going through a technology selection process likely goes through a pretty rigorous evaluation, detailed solution requirements that they then map to provider capabilities and really base, to a large extent, the results on that type of an evaluation. So very interesting response there. And just wanted to follow up our poll with comparing it to the response to our survey overall, which did differ in a significant fashion in that ease of use was far away, top select criteria. More than 3/4 of the respondents said that was the most critical. In fact, in this case, there are really a big three that emerged. Our Pulse of Procurement 2016 study, it was a combination of ease of use, the TCO, the price or value for money, and the solution feature fit the technology with the organization's requirements at 69%, which was the top selection in the poll that we just conducted here. And significant drop-off then to the other characteristics, less weight then given to the overall reputation of solution provider themselves, although I might surmise that the indication is that it's kind of a given that those solution providers that really make the short list on the top 3 criteria or separate themselves from ease of use, TCO, and solution feature capability standpoint are also likely to really meet the requirements that organizations place on their providers in terms of responsiveness, support, company references, and overall brand reputation. So another poll question on the topic of technology utilization that we wanted to cover here. We'll open the polls for you again. What are the top reasons that you've seen for lower technology use and utilization? Is it A, that difficult to drive the required change management around a new technology, something that's just new and disruptive to the organization? Number one, is that the overarching barrier to overcome with regard to technology adoption? Is it B, the intuitiveness, the features themselves, the user interface is cumbersome and difficult to use? Is it more around how the technology is rolled out, that there isn't sufficient training and ongoing learning to support the users' day-to-day endeavors? Or is that the features themselves don't match very well to those day-to-day tasks, that kind of a lack of alignment to be able to adequately support the normal operating activities of the end users? So again, there's fewer choices here, so maybe it's easy to respond quickly for this particular poll, but I think in a lot of cases I've seen that one of the biggest barriers have been either that a lot of intuitive, easy-to-use interface, or overall really daunting change management challenges, that this disruptive kind of new technology, even if easy to use, can be sort of a jarring change for the organization. So my guess is that the poll response may highlight either change management or of an intuitive, easy-to-use user experience that can be the biggest challenges for technology adoption and utilization. So as we close the poll here, the results, in this case, certainly change management is the top response, so nearly half. So it's difficult to drive, required change management and sort of a smattering of response in the other categories, but clearly this change management challenge tends to be the largest one that comes to the fore for our group today. So thanks again for that feedback on the poll with regard to technology utilization. So a lot of this has been one place to date. We all wanted to include in our study some feedback on what procurement leaders and organizations view as the future. What are the future trends and their predictions for the way that the function will continue to evolve going forward. And overall, these are the areas that tended to be the trending topics, if you will, the continued evolution of the procurement function itself from a tactical to strategic role. The increasing importance of big data analytics, more focus around tighter supply synergy and collaboration with the supply chain itself, the increased focus and utilization on mobile technology, so away from being tethered to the desktop and more work being done through mobile technology interface, smartphones and tablets, or green buying, continued focus and, in fact, increased focus on sustainable practices as well. So, with the European study participants, almost half say the major push is continuing this transformation from tactical to strategic. Although that's slightly lower for Europe than was true globally. 55% globally said that's the top trend that predict for the procurement function overall. European focus actually was higher on big data and mobile procurement than the other regions overall. So very technology-centric, and of course the ability of mobile technology probably further penetrated in Europe than certainly in most parts of the U.S. or North America, as an example. So the European groups being on the forefront of both mobile technology and big data analytics. But nevertheless, the production trend still remains completing or accelerating this transition from tactical to strategic, 47%. And some of the activities then enable this transition, this metamorphosis from tactical to strategic, really revolve around data accessibility. So spend analytics as a tool then rationalize and optimize the supply base to get much greater efficiency, also to gain volume buying leverage with those suppliers, and do a more effective job in strategic sourcing, and not just spend management, but also consumption or demand management as well. So those are some of the key trends that have been predicted. And in terms of predictions themselves, for what does the future look like, a lot of different trends mapped across this particular graphic, but just hold out some of the actual quotes that came in from survey respondents, specifically in Europe, that really put some color or additional insight on what they think the future looks like from a procurement standpoint. You see, for instance, big data analytics will continue dominate, and not that data and analytics will be important, but they'll be used in new and different ways. So not just analytics, for instance, spend analytics that look in the rearview mirror to see what's happened historically, but more and more predictive and prescriptive analytics, a trend that's sometimes referred to as cognitive computing, to really drive decision-making and behavior with a more forward-looking aspect in that more predictive and prescriptive way. From a technology standpoint, quote here, all procurement activities done through one or more technology solutions. So more and more focus around, wherever possible, a single platform of integrated tools that will also drive this phenomenon, more automation, lights out procurement. Can focus then as well on supplier collaboration. So the quote here, engineering with suppliers to reduce the time to implementation. So also get the best innovative ideas from the supply base as a way to drive competitive differentiation. And these efficiencies or savings at the expense of corporate social responsibility, but there's an ongoing tension that's recognized here, more conflict between value for money and social objectives. And around the trend of outsourcing, certain forecasts here are prediction that, especially in light of the budget constraints and challenges, that more and more of the technical work in the procurement role, so transactional buying around P2P or simply creating RPs from a transactional document process standpoint, the RFP build, having to do more with less. More organizations may look to outsource the lower value tactical tasks and focus on the highest value strategic activities instead. So we'll finish up our study and our webinar and discussion today with a wish list. You know, what are the, and a final poll. I'll ask you to weigh in on your wish list in a moment here, but that came to the fore when we polled those 650 respondents globally. From a technology standpoint, what are they looking for most often? An integrated tool set that creates a one-stop shop. It's user-friendly, it's fast, simple and easy to use, not only user-friendly but mobile-friendly. It's the flexibility to incorporate a number of different types of data to integrate easily with their EP systems and so on. And on the right-hand side, the most wished-for functionality, really from an outcome standpoint, applications that would enable us to do a better job controlling inventory or managing a contingent workforce, contractors, blending external market with internal business intelligence analytics, and the list goes on, managing suppliers more actively and proactively and doing a better job of change management amongst the list. So, you know, in closing today, we wanted to have a poll question, have a chance for you to weigh in, get a wish list as to what you'd like to see from the heuristics of your technology platforms. Is it more important that A, it be integrated, or B, a one-stop solution? Admit those two are pretty closely related. C, is it, you know, user-friendly? Speed the most important thing? D, is it faster? Is simplicity attribute that you're looking for? E, is it the fact that it be mobile-ready? F, is it G, the flexibility of the underlying data structure itself to be able to do better reporting, better integration with enterprise systems? H, more fluid between both on and offline uses? Or I, free from duplication or overlap? And will be a number of choices for you here, but we'll be closing the poll momentarily, and again, I'll make a little bit of a prediction as we we look ahead to the final poll results here. Certainly, cases, the overriding concerns are, A, that I can have a single integrated platform that creates a one-stop shop. First and foremost, it makes my life easier to manage a single technology provider. It also makes it easier to complete integration, but also that visibility gain from a one-stop shop means flow front to back, more of a true process integration as well as the data integration. It makes it easier to drive adoption because of a common user experience and look and feel. So that tends to be number one, or actually just that user experience itself that's so critical, that be user-friendly or fast, simple, mobile-ready, and friendly, that somewhere sort of between those two components is where I would expect the majority of our responses to fall out. We'll just go ahead and close it and add the final results to our last poll here as they populate for me. I'd gone out on a limb and made my prediction here that it's going to be either an integrated one-stop platform or some form of ease of use, faster, more simpler, more mobile-friendly, those kinds of things. And in fact, as the results have come in, the most popular response is having that integrated capability. So nearly a third there, followed closely by either user-friendliness of the application or the flexibility of the technology itself from a structural data standpoint. So thanks so much for participating in all of our polls. Really helpful to get that real-time feedback, and to any of you that participated in the actual Pulse of Procurement study were amongst those 650 that ate in. Thanks for that too. If you didn't have a chance to participate in this year's version, would encourage you to do so next year, as this is something we're committed to producing on an annual basis. It really helps us plot the trends as they change from one year to the next. As the procurement function continues